So good to be here. Great to be here today. I come from a family of builders, believe it or not. Both of my grandparents, on both sides, my grandfathers, both of them were builders, construction workers, leaders in their respective work. And my uncle on my dad's side, my dad's brother, he is a construction worker. He's been all his life. He built my brother's apartment. And also, I have another uncle on my mom's side, the only uncle that I have on my mom's side that is alive, and he is also a builder with all things like iron and steel and stuff like that. My dad, he's a great carpenter. He's never done it for a living, but he has done great things. This is a picture of him, both pictures up there, doing things for the church and the church building. And throughout the years, we did many things together. What that means is I watched him do things and I just handed like a tool. So I learned a lot from watching, not so much from doing. That's why it was really good that I went to college. Because I think I was the first one in my family, in both sides of my family, like that actually went to college. Probably I wouldn't have made it as a construction worker here in the United States, especially in days like this, very cold. This is our wedding day. Catherine and I had a Japanese wedding theme. If that's, it doesn't make sense to you probably because we're from Costa Rica, but it was all Japanese stuff. And my dad decided to build that, we call it tori or tori. I don't know how you call it in English, but my dad built that for the entrance for the wedding. And so he's a great construction worker and builder in all things wood, carpenter. I'm the son of a carpenter, which is a preacher, which is very Christian, isn't it? So this is a baptistry my dad and I built together for the church. That's, you probably don't know it, she's not here, but that's Donna being baptized almost 6 years ago. And that's the baptistry that my dad and I built. Anyway, I'm not the builder, but I come from a family of builders, right? So if that makes sense to you. And then Noah, the other day, we were building something. And this is something that he's got, a little Stanley working table. And you can see like he's probably following the footsteps of his grandfathers, right? The construction worker. And so today we're going to be talking a little bit about rebuilding from Ezra chapter 1 and 2. I just want us to remember this. You open the Bible and you're Ezra in the Old Testament, which is like the 15th book in the Bible as we have it in order. But the story is almost actually at the end of the Old Testament. And they're building or rebuilding a temple. And what does that mean for us? For some of us, that doesn't make a lot of sense. It creates some questions like, are we supposed to be building a temple today? Or should we go to Jerusalem? Or what is it? And so let's just remember what the New Testament says. Jesus said, I will build my church. Matthew 16:18. So Paul says in Acts 17, God does not live in temples built by human hands, and he's not served by human hands, as if he needed anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. From one man, he made all nations, and he did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he's not far from any one of us. And that was in Acts 17. Paul said that he continues and says, we are co-workers in God's service. You are God's field, God's building. We are that building. And then he says, we have a building from God, an eternal house in heaven, not built by human hands. Therefore, this is what I want us to think about. Since we are no longer called to rebuild a physical temple for God, we are the spiritual temple. We are that temple. But we are to help build or rebuild his kingdom, which is the church. So we can draw lessons from Ezra 1 and 2 and see their process of rebuilding the temple and make applications about how we are rebuilding today. So the first thing that I want us to think about when we see the book of Ezra in chapter 1 is that God transforms us. There's a story about King Cyrus, and it says that the Lord moved the heart of him. And it really caught me when I was reading the text. Here's King Cyrus, and the first thing that we read is that the Lord moved his heart. And what happens in verse 7 is that he's going to bring back a lot of what was taken away. He didn't have to really do this as king. The other king before him, he had taken stuff away. He had placed it in the temple of his god or his lower gods. And then now this King Cyrus has a heart that has been moved, that is being transformed. And he says, I want to do what is right. I want to rebuild for the Lord. And look at the inventory of the things that was taken away from God's temple. It was 5,400 articles of gold and silver. I like this quote by this lady, Ruth Haley Barton. She wrote the book, Strengthening the Soul of Your Leadership. And she says, the best gift that you can give the people you lead is your transforming self. I believe that is very true. Some of us are leaders, whether we like it or not. God has pointed us in this direction, and we're here today. We're leading people. Not that we call ourselves leaders, but we are leading people. A lot of people in this room are leaders of many. You are spiritual leaders. And the best gift that you can give somebody that you're leading is not how much you know. It's not how much you attend services. It's not all those things that people may see on the surface. The best gift that you can give the people you lead is you being transformed. Is that evident? And I asked this question, 2 questions. The first one is, are you in the business of being transformed or in the business of only transforming others? Some people are only in the business of being transformed. They may show up and say, I'm just here to take in. I just want to be transformed. That's probably not good either. And some people are just in the business of transforming others. There needs to be a balance for us to be doing both. But the best way to transform others is when you're being transformed yourself. And King Cyrus was being transformed. And he was going to lead this and then just start the process in chapter 1, but he needed to be transformed by God. The second question, then, if you are in the business of being transformed, how are you being transformed? And is that evident to people? See, if you're not being transformed and you're only transforming people, transforming others, that's your only interest, that must be so exhausting. I've probably been there, done that, and that has taken me through a lot. I've shared with you plenty. Many of you have been here for all those 7 lessons that I shared on emotional health. And a lot of those things on emotional health that I shared with you from my personal experience was to forget that I needed to be transformed, that should have been a priority for me, and that I was only in the business of people being transformed and how I can transform them. And it's so exhausting. It's so exhausting for you, and it's so exhausting for the people around you. It is exhausting. It was exhausting for my family. It was exhausting for my wife to see a man that was leading a church, and his only interest was how he could change others. And that he forgot that he was also being transformed by God. And so as the people of God are ready to begin the rebuilding process of the temple, they have the blessing of God. God is blessing them. He is the main person being that is taking them through this process. And they have the support of the king. They have everything to win it. But nonetheless, they may face some potential challenges. And as we rebuild the church of God today, we also have his blessings. We know that's God's will. He wants us to keep rebuilding on the church. But we also have potential challenges. And it's very important for us to identify those challenges and learn how to deal with them. So that's my second point. And I want to share with you 3 challenges as we build for God. So 3 challenges. And the first one is accepting the free will. For me, that's the first challenge. Accepting the free will of others. Let's read here. Any of his people, this is King Cyrus, he wrote this and then he proclaimed that throughout all of Judah. He said, any of his people among you may go up to Jerusalem in Judah and build the temple of the Lord. And in any locality where survivors may now be living, the people are to provide them with silver, gold, goods, livestock, and then he ends with this. People are to provide them with free will offerings for the temple of God in Jerusalem. So, when you read this, think about it. If you're going to take on the challenge and say, okay, I'm going to go back to Jerusalem and start building. Okay, what's the budget, right? Many of us live on a budget. We write a budget and we say we got to pay rent and pay this and pay that. That's our budget. Well, they say we're going to have silver and gold and goods and livestock, okay? And then free will offerings. Would you take on that challenge? So it would have been very hard probably for me to say to Catherine, hey, Catherine, we're going to go to Green Bay. This is the salary, but part of the salary is free will offerings. What would you think if you were in those shoes? Let's say your job, your current job, whatever they pay you. Let's say tomorrow you have a meeting and they say, we're gonna have your salary in half, and the next is just like free will offerings from the people that you work for. Would you take it? Some of you are smiling, probably like considering, I'm not sure I would. Well, these people had to live with the free will offerings. And so he keeps writing and says, then the family heads of Judah and Benjamin and the priests and Levites, everyone whose heart God had moved, prepared to go up and build the house of the Lord in Jerusalem. After he writes in verse 4, this is what the people do. The people said, we're going to go. God had prepared them to go and build the house of the Lord in Jerusalem, and they went. And it says that all their neighbors assisted them with articles of silver and gold, goods and livestock, and with valuable gifts in addition to all the free will offerings. So those free will offerings were given, but they were free will. And they didn't have to probably give a certain amount, but they had to live off of that. And after they arrived at the end of chapter 2, after they arrived at the Lord's house in Jerusalem, some of the family heads gave free will offerings for the house of God in order to have it rebuilt on its original site. Let me tell you a little bit of our story here. So we came to the United States in September of 2021. That is Catherine, me, and Noah. And we didn't have a car. So I start working for the university in Tennessee. But the first thing that I do is I got to finish my master's. I don't have a salary because I don't have a work visa. So we have some friends in Kentucky, and he's an elder, and they had an extra car. And you can see it there. That's the GMC Terrain. And they just said, Diego, here, you have that car for however long you need it until you actually get a salary and you get your own car. So we had sold the car in Costa Rica, and we had that money, but we had it saved. And we didn't want to buy a car until it was time when we got the work visa and all of that. So it took about I don't know, like 6 or 7 months, I think. We had that car, and they were like, just have it. Just use it. And so we used that car in September of 2021. From there, like 6 or 7 months. And then January 2022 came, and to tell you the story, in September 2021, we didn't have an apartment, we didn't have a house, we don't have a salary, what are we going to do? So we go, and the McCutcheon family in Henderson, they were like, just live on in our garage apartment behind our house. They said, just live there while you serve the university. I was like, okay. So this is a picture of the apartment. I just decided to use that one since it was like 3 years ago. And it was like Noah's first day that he actually walked. So I took that picture, that selfie. But we lived in this tiny apartment. We had a little table, we had a bed, and we had a bathroom. And in the bathroom, there was a tiny fridge. That's where we lived for about 8 months. And then at the end of January, we moved out and went to a house that we actually rented. We were able to rent now. Now, that photo up there, January 2023, that's at the end of the month. When we first got to that house, we didn't have anything. There was nothing in the living room. And I tell you the story because when we moved there, a lot of our members, church friends, all of that you see in that living room, that was given to us. And I wish I could say, hey, no, I paid for some of that. But no, I mean, the case was, it was given to us. We just went and picked it up. We still have some of those couches, or some of those couches are here in the basement, or some of you have it somewhere. But we were given stuff. We even had a piano. I don't play the piano. None of us do. But my wife found a piano in Marketplace, and she made me go get it. Some of you men can relate. You know how that is. That thing was heavy. Like, I got back problems, and that thing was not helpful at all. But we got the piano, and now the piano, Ashley, Catherine's little stepsister, has it in Memphis. But we got that piano for decoration or whatever. But we were given stuff. And then at the end of our time in Tennessee, see, like, we're building our life in Tennessee. And I tell Catherine, if we go to Tennessee, we're going to build a life there. And so we're building our life in Tennessee. And then something happens, and God says, I want you to move to Green Bay. And it's not like in a dream or anything like that. That didn't happen. It was just, a very, biblical process of seeing particular reasons and making decisions. And so we made the decision to come. And this picture is in July of 2023. Now we had our own car that we had paid for. But that U-Haul was filled with stuff that pretty much everything in that U-Haul was given to us. And we came, and what did we do? We came and put it in a storage. This is in the summer of 2023. We came and put it in a storage, and we had it there for a few months. Why? Because we rented a house that was furnished. See, when you think about it, September 2021, we just got here. And by September 2023, in only 2 years, we had so much, we didn't even know where to put all this stuff. And we barely pay for any of that. And so the story that I'm trying to get across here, by March of 2024, you can see my office downstairs. We had even more couches that were given to us. And at some point, Catherine and I were like, we came here with nothing. We came here with luggage. We came here with some money that we had saved and stuff, but we came with luggage, and we didn't know. And God takes you through a journey. And living off free will, people, offerings, they give you stuff, that's one thing. But what about in the spiritual sense? If we're rebuilding the church, and the point that I'm trying to get across is this: if we are part of a congregation where a lot of people give out of free will, their time, they volunteer for stuff. The question is, are we willing to accept that? Catherine and I had to learn we didn't have any other choice. Now we got more choices, which car to buy and stuff like that. But back then we didn't have a choice. And sometimes that's the case in the spiritual sense. When you're building a church, you have people and they do their free will offerings, and it's up to you to accept it or not. It's going to be very challenging for you if you're not willing to accept what the people give. And not just what the people give to you, what the people give God. It is a great challenge for you if you have made up your mind that you're not willing to accept what people give. And that creates a second challenge that I want to talk about, is managing the people. Managing the people sometimes is very hard. A lot of people say, Diego, you have a great job. And then some people say, Diego, you have a very challenging job. And sometimes what they say is that you work with people. And probably one of the greatest blessings that some of us have is working with people. But for some people, that would be one of the greatest challenges, to work with people. And so to manage people sometimes is hard. Look at this. These are the people, Ezra 2 begins saying, these are the people of the province who came up. And it's going to give the number. It's going to say the priests included, the Levites included, the singers included, the gatekeepers, descendants included, the temple servants included, the descendants of Solomon. All of those people, you have a huge list, and you have those verses that you can see there. And then it says, the whole combined assembly numbered 42,000 plus, not including their 3,000 plus servants and their 200 male and female singers. When you read that, what I did was I did a little bit of the math. I just added those numbers up, and it gives you 49,897, almost 50,000 people. So the whole amount of people that came up to Jerusalem, it was this amount of people. So about half of the size of the city of Green Bay. Can you imagine if that was our church? Think about you in your position, being in a church of this size, and sometimes you may have to deal with certain people or certain attitudes or things that you may encounter, and those become challenging. Now think about this amount of people. That's a lot. And when I see that, I think the journey to Jerusalem, get there, start building. And one thing that we're going to see, and I'm sure Barry and Derek and Caleb and all of you who are going to be preaching in the following Sundays, you're probably going to point out, and we're going to see those challenges of people that were disappointed. People that had expectations about how the rebuilding process was supposed to be. And so managing the people is not easy. And if we're leading, if we're rebuilding the church, that's a question that we got to ask. How are we managing the people? How are we willing to manage the people? And part of that is, remember that people also have to deal with me. It's not just you dealing with somebody else. People have to deal with you. That's what I take from this. People have to deal with me. And so the third challenge is keeping the goal. Keeping the goal. They had a goal. King Cyrus wrote it. Now go to Jerusalem, whoever wants to, from these people. And so they went. And after they arrived, at the end of chapter 2, it says they arrived at the Lord's house in Jerusalem. Some of the family heads gave the free will offerings for the house of God in order to. They gave those free will offerings to maintain the goal in order to have it rebuilt on its original site. That's what they wanted. And based on what they could give, they gave 61,000 gold coins, all those pounds of silver and all those priestly garments to the treasury for the project. They gave a lot because they had their goal in mind. They wanted to keep the goal, they wanted to maintain the goal. And the question that I have today then is, what's the goal today? And that's what I want to finish up today with as a conclusion. The end goal in rebuilding. And so I have just three, I hope this is really easy. 3 ways to see it, or 3 steps, if you want to call it that way. The first one is rebuild me. Rebuild me. And so in Matthew 7, Jesus is going to finish the Sermon of the Mount, and he says, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. I listened to those words from Jesus at the end of the Sermon of the Mountain. And I think about Jesus talking to all those people. He said in Matthew 16 that he's going to rebuild the church. Yet here the church hasn't been built yet. And so here you got a bunch of individuals listening to him. I mean, you got thousands. And the take that I draw from this is a more individual take. People are listening to Jesus, and Jesus wants to touch on the heart of each individual. That's me. That's you. That's each one of us. I pray that as we rebuild this church, that we hear the words of Jesus, that we focus on the words of Jesus, that we hear those, and that we can build on Jesus as our foundation, and that we become as Jesus. See, we gotta be willing to say, God, rebuild me first. This is a great congregation, a congregation that has lots of wonderful goals, and we have goals and we have a vision for our community, which is to rebuild it and to restore the community and to renew it. We have that vision. But let me tell you something very important. Until we, all of us here, are willing to say, God, rebuild me first, then we'll be on the right track. When we are willing to be rebuilt, and then we can say, number 2, rebuild us. Rebuild me first, now rebuild us as a team. And Jesus had that vision. He said, I will build my church. He said, I will. It's not just I have a dream, one day having a church that is built upon me, that is built on my foundation. No, Jesus said, I will build my church. If we have that type of vision and we see it in our future and say, how do we want our church to be? So tomorrow, in this country, in this nation, we remember and celebrate the story of Martin Luther King Jr. And he said, I have a dream. I have a dream. The dream that he had, whatever it was, that dream that he had at that time, he envisioned that dream. He saw it in the future. Many people didn't at that time, and he got killed. The same thing as Jesus. Jesus said, I will build my church. And the people that killed him, they didn't want that church to be built. And the same problem we have today. We have dreams about a church that is rebuilt with Jesus as the cornerstone, as the foundation. But we got to listen to the words of Jesus and do as he says, to be rebuilt individually. And then we can rebuild ourselves as a church. And then third, we can rebuild them. We can rebuild the people on the outside. We can rebuild the community. First, rebuild me. Second, rebuild us. And third, rebuild them. Unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. Psalm 127, verse 1. I hope and I wish that we are not builders laboring in vain. That God is doing the work. Just like God took them back to Jerusalem to start the work and to start the rebuilding, I hope that God is at the center of our rebuilding process. The last verse that I want to share with you is Acts 4. Peter said, Jesus is the stone you builders rejected, which has become the cornerstone. Salvation is found in no one else, for there is no other name under heaven given to mankind by which we must be saved. So today what I want to ask you to do is to pray for yourself. I pray for myself that I can be rebuilt in Jesus, that all the things that I was taught, the way that I was brought up in the church, that I can take it and put it aside for 1 second, and that I see Jesus and I listen to him and I really get what he wants me to do for my life, so that we can be rebuilt in the proper way with Jesus as the cornerstone, and that way we'll be ready to go out there and rebuild this community. Thank you for your time. May God bless you. I hope this lesson is applicable to you as it is to me. Thank you.